4 names.
That's what the Department of Justice put on a federal lawsuit filed June 16, 2026. Amir Bassiri, New York's Medicaid Director; James McDonald, New York's Health Commissioner; the New York State Department of Health; and a private equity-backed company called Public Partnerships LLC. The DOJ says these are the people and organizations at the center of one of the largest alleged government contracting scandals of 2026. Nobody has been criminally charged, but the federal government is alleging bid rigging, cover-ups, stolen patient data, and millions of dollars in unauthorized profits, all connected to a $10 billion Medicaid program that serves some of New York's most vulnerable residents. And the people who were supposed to protect those residents? The DOJ says they were in on it. This is the $10 billion backroom deal.
Welcome back to Fraudology.
This channel exists for one reason: to follow the money and expose the fraud that powerful people hope you never hear about. Today's story has everything: a $10 billion government contract, a company that allegedly couldn't do the job, state officials who allegedly covered it up, and a federal lawsuit naming names. Let's go.
Before we get to the fraud allegations,
You need to understand what's actually at stake here, because this isn't about abstract government money. This is about real people. CDPAP, the Consumer-Directed Personal Assistance Program, provides home care through lay caregivers, including family members, to Medicaid patients with disabilities or significant medical needs. As of fall 2024, it was one of New York's largest health benefit programs, with more than 250,000 patients and more than 300,000 caregivers. Think about who that is. A grandmother who needs help getting dressed in the morning. A disabled veteran who wants to stay in his own home. A young person with a chronic illness who chose family care over a nursing facility. CDPAP gave them that choice. For years, the program was run by hundreds of small companies called fiscal intermediaries. They handled payroll and paperwork for caregivers across the state. Then, in 2024, New York decided to change everything. The state moved to streamline CDPAP in an effort to curb soaring Medicaid expenses, consolidating management from hundreds of companies into a single fiscal intermediary. On paper, that sounds like smart government. In practice, the DOJ says it became a blueprint for fraud.
so who won this massive contract?
A Georgia-based company called Public Partnerships LLC, known as PPL, which now manages New York's Consumer-Directed Personal Assistance Program. PPL is private equity-backed, and the contract they landed is one of the most valuable healthcare service agreements in the entire United States. Here's where the DOJ's allegations get explosive. The federal complaint alleges that state leaders chose PPL before bidding even began. Before bidding even began. According to federal prosecutors, the Department of Health disqualified 132 other bidders and ignored warnings that PPL lacked the staff and technology to enroll hundreds of thousands of patients and workers by the April 2025 deadline. 132 competitors knocked out, and the company that made it through allegedly couldn't handle the job. But winning the contract was just the beginning.
Let's get specific.
Because this is the part most news coverage glosses over. The DOJ didn't just sue a faceless agency, they named individuals. First, Amir Bassiri, New York's Medicaid director. The Justice Department named him directly in the lawsuit, alleging he played a role in the contract award process that favored PPL. Second, Dr. James McDonald, New York's health commissioner. The federal lawsuit named him as a defendant, alleging state officials participated in a flawed bidding process. Third, the New York State Department of Health itself. The DOJ alleges the agency awarded PPL the lucrative CDPAP contract after conducting a sham bid process, and then, despite learning that PPL intended to deviate from its promises and violate the financial terms of the contract, failed to take action. Fourth, Public Partnerships LLC, PPL. The DOJ alleges the company generated millions of dollars in unauthorized profits funded by federal taxpayers in connection with its takeover of the program. Now, Governor Kathy Hochul is not named as a defendant and has not been charged with any crime. But her administration is all over this lawsuit. Emails from the governor's office are reproduced in the federal complaint, with prosecutors alleging the DOH was told to hide poor enrollment numbers behind a misleading count of started registrations. We'll come back to that. Here's the mechanics of the alleged fraud. And it's clever. PPL submitted a low bid of $68.50 per patient per month, promising that amount would cover all administrative costs. That low number made them look like the fiscally responsible choice. But the DOJ says it was a bait and switch. PPL allegedly skimmed from separate hourly rates that were meant to pay caregivers, violating their contract. Then, to fund the transition, they used their monopoly position to force local managed care organizations into paying multi-million-dollar cash advances. Organizations that refused were threatened with being kicked out of CDPAP altogether. A company that won a government contract was allegedly strong-arming healthcare organizations for cash. And New York's Department of Health, according to the DOJ, watched it happen and did nothing. The lawsuit alleges that despite learning of PPL's intent to deviate from its bid and violate the financial terms of the contract, the state failed to take action to hold PPL accountable, resulting in a fraud scheme that remains unchecked to this day.
Now we get to what the DOJ is calling
a deliberate cover-up. Emails from the governor's office in the complaint tell the Department of Health to hide poor enrollment numbers behind a misleading count of started registrations for the new system. So people who had merely clicked a button were being counted as fully enrolled. The crisis was hidden behind manipulated statistics. The lawsuit also claims that state officials and company executives later lied to lawmakers about the transition. And here's a detail that should make everyone uncomfortable. The DOJ accused PPL and the Department of Health of taking sensitive personal health data from the old fiscal intermediaries to drive enrollment numbers, launching a telemarketing blitz that sparked privacy complaints from patients who had never consented to sharing that information. Patients' private medical information, allegedly used without their consent, to manufacture the appearance of a smooth rollout. Meanwhile, the reality on the ground was a disaster. Payment failures drove 150,000 workers and 90,000 consumers out of the program. Real people, real harm, allegedly hidden from the public.
Now let's be fair.
Because both sides are pushing back hard. The New York Department of Health did not take this quietly. A spokesperson for the department called the lawsuit baseless and said it was the latest attempt by Washington Republicans to score political points at the expense of vulnerable New Yorkers. The state also pointed to a prior appellate division ruling from October 2025, in which courts confirmed the contract with PPL met all legal terms, suggesting the bidding process was legally sound. PPL issued its own denial. A PPL spokesperson said the company was selected through a transparent, competitive process and called the DOJ's characterizations inaccurate, saying they would respond through the appropriate legal process. And here's the political wrinkle you need to understand. J.D. Vance was in Nassau County the same day the lawsuit dropped, at an event specifically spotlighting the administration's crackdown on Medicaid fraud, where he called out New York's state Medicaid director by role for facilitating fraud. That timing is not a coincidence. This lawsuit is also a political statement. State Senator James Skoufis, who led the state Senate's own investigation, put it this way: PPL's testimony to the state Senate, under oath, was false, and their follow-up correction was intentionally misleading. While I have grave concerns with the ability of Donald Trump's DOJ to impartially prosecute this case, PPL and the Department of Health have a lot of answering to do. The messenger may be politically motivated, but that doesn't mean the message is wrong.
So where does this go from here?
The DOJ is seeking to appoint a receiver for PPL and halt what it calls ongoing fraud. The lawsuit also seeks to stop all defendants from making further misrepresentations about the CDPAP program and from charging taxpayers for costs not authorized under the contract. This is currently a civil lawsuit, not a criminal case. Amir Bassiri, James McDonald, PPL. None of them have been criminally charged. All parties are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. But civil fraud cases of this scale can take years to resolve, and they can absolutely lead to criminal referrals, depending on what discovery turns up. Documents will be subpoenaed. Witnesses will testify. Those emails from the governor's office will be examined very carefully. And 250,000 patients are waiting to find out what happens to their care.
Let me bring this back to what actually matters.
The DOJ has named names. Amir Bassiri, New York's Medicaid director; James McDonald, New York's health commissioner; the New York State Department of Health, Public Partnerships LLC. These are the 4 defendants in a federal lawsuit alleging bid rigging, procurement fraud, patient data theft, cover-ups, and millions in unauthorized profits, all connected to a program that 250,000 of New York's most vulnerable people depend on. Nobody has been criminally charged yet, but the federal government is saying clearly, we believe a $10 billion government contract was rigged, and we believe people got hurt because of it. Whether that's proven in court is a separate question. What's not a question is the damage. 150,000 caregivers and 90,000 patients were pushed out of the program during the transition. That happened. Someone needs to answer for it. Fraudology will be here when they do.
Here's my question for you in the comments.
When a politically motivated DOJ exposes what might be a real fraud, does the motivation matter? Or is accountability accountability, no matter who's delivering it? Drop your thoughts below. If this video gave you the full picture that the headlines didn't, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. New investigations drop every week. This is Fraudology, following the money, exposing the truth.